You're listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.
This episode,
we've got a code brown in Fab Facts.
We're trying to remember where we put Frank in the randomiser.
and it's the return of Radio Times writer and raconteur, Morgan Jeffery.
That's all coming up in Pod 107
of the Gerry Anderson podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's get started. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Gerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
Hello.
Hello, Richard James.
Hello, Jamie Anderson. You're in fine voice today.
Thank you very much. I try. I'm just very excited because, I don't know, the first 5 or 6 into the hundreds, I didn't feel like we'd really hit our centennial stride.
Oh, really?
And now I feel like we're so far in, you know,
right.
The next 93 or so
Might as well keep on going.
are going to be a breeze. Yeah, I can't wait.
Right.
Anyway, this is the Gerry
Okay.
Anderson podcast. We've already introduced ourselves, the host. We're also going to be joined later by Chris Dale, who does the randomiser. But what else is coming up today, Richard James?
Oh, well, you've joined us just in the nick of time because we've got some great stuff coming up in today's Gerry Anderson podcast. We've got, of course, some news from the Gerry Anderson universe because there's new stuff happening. I forget what I said. What is that phrase? There's brand new Gerry Anderson stuff happening right now.
Right now is what you said.
Oh, you see, yeah. But anyway, you know what I mean. We've also got some Fab Facts coming up in a little while. We've got part 2 of Jamie's interview with Morgan Jeffery from Radio Times, Chris Dale's Randomiser, of course, and we'll be hearing from our lovely Podsterons. They've been emailing us at podcast at gerryanderson.co.uk.
Well remembered.
They've been posting on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Podsterons.
What's wrong with your memory today?
And they've been tweeting us and hashtagging us Gerry Anderson Podcast and tagging him, I'm Jamie Anderson, and me, Richard N. James.
And Chris Dale at Chris Dalek.
At Chris Dalek. Yes, there we are. So get in touch. Please also subscribe to us on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Leave us a rating and share us with your friends so they can hear us too. I think I've covered all bases.
I think you have just about, yes.
Yeah.
You're very good at this. It's almost like you've been practicing for 107 weeks.
Well, you'd think if that was the case, I would at least remember what my most famous phrase is.
What, news? There is
that as well, yes.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
I have just so many catchphrases.
You are the king of catchphrases, including a bit of the old Wogan,
I'll be talking about that in a bit as well.
Oh, really? Do we have to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do, yeah.
Okay. We'll also be hearing a little bit from you in the news, Richard, in a pre-recorded format where you'll be doing another one of your amazing impressions. But let's leave the audience on tenterhooks for that and instead get them warmed up and excited with a fab fact.
Well, you say that.
Now, time for this week's Fab Facts.
Warmed up and excited. Really?
That's my general status at the moment because of the weather.
Yeah, I know. Whoa.
So this is Fab Facts. I hope we'll deliver you something exciting. But I've got a book of Fab Facts. I flick through it. Richard shouts Fab at a random point, and at that point I stop flicking and then hopefully read us a Fab Fact from that page. Are you ready, Richard James?
Yeah, it's about the size of it.
Then here we go.
Fab.
Interesting. We are in the 1960s.
Again.
1966, 1967. I'm just saying, on the page that I've stopped on, I just saw a few words that reminded me of you.
Oh, really?
Qualities of vagueness and absent-mindedness.
Eh?
But that's not the fact that we're dealing with today. No, Richard, Captain Scarlet, which we visited quite a few times in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Now, whenever Century 21 were working on a new show, obviously they were trying to take things up a notch. That was one of Dad's driving forces, always wanting to make things better if he possibly could.
Yeah.
You're part of that because you were on Space Precinct, as you know, and that was trying to take kind of aliens and prostheses, etc.,
and
to the next
even
level.
now, Jamie, I'm trying to make every podcast better than the last. So I'm continuing that legacy even now.
I hadn't noticed. Okay. Anyway, so they were trying to make things better and better. And obviously, Captain Scarlet, you made the transition from the larger-headed, more caricatured proportions of the Thunderbirds puppets through to the human proportions of Captain Scarlet. Mm-hmm. But they also wanted to up the detail and the fine work in the effects department. So Derek Meddings obviously was in charge of that.
Yes.
And they went to some rather special effort in the first episode. But it just goes to show that sometimes huge amounts of work are done, but never make it to the screen.
Oh.
So in the first episode of Captain Scarlet, Captain Brown is Mysteronized and takes the world president to the maximum security building. Obviously, Spectrum don't know at this point that he is Mysteronized. Mm-hmm. And he is actually a human bomb and explodes. Yes, there's a bit where smoke's coming out of him. It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
Just hate it when that happens.
Yeah. Always at the most sort of crucial moment.
Yes.
It's very unfair, isn't it?
So inconvenient.
Yes. Well, that's exactly what the world president thought. Anyway, they knew this big effect shot was going to be in the first episode. They really wanted to make something of it. So when they went to make the maximum security building, Derek's team actually went to the trouble of furnishing every single individual room that can be seen through the windows of the maximum security building.
Lovely.
So each room about the size of a matchbox.
Yeah.
And then they were slid into the room just to give detail. But each one, had tables, chairs, little bits of detail and furniture and all that sort of stuff.
Amazing. Spider plants, very big in the 60s.
Spider
lava
plants,
lamps.
absolutely. Full of lava lamps, the whole thing. Although this was set, obviously, in the 2060s.
Of course.
They just came back around, as all things do.
That's right. If you wait long enough.
So the plan was that this building would blow up and you would see amazing kind of debris flying out the windows, like the chairs and, a vase and a lava lamp and all that sort of stuff coming out towards the camera. Unfortunately, when the charges went off, that blast threw out so much debris and dust towards the camera that it completely obscured all the detail and debris that came flying out.
Oh no!
So
we never actually saw the immense effort. Oh.
No. So we actually see about 10 floors of windows with 10 rooms in each of that building. But the full model was 18 floors high, so that was 180 model rooms, all put together, meticularely decorated and constructed, and for no reason at all.
Oh, what a shame. It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
I mean, I know, they obviously, when they were building it, they knew it was to be blown up, but it was all done to try and give this lovely effect of added detail, and we never saw any of it.
Never saw any of it.
Oh, can you imagine when they saw the rushes and they're just like, oh no.
Yeah, although actually, I bet they just put it behind them fairly quickly because we know that breed of person. Steve Begg, he loves building stuff to blow it up.
Well, and David Tremont, as he mentioned last podcast or the one before, you are doing it for that purpose. However, you're doing it for that purpose in the hope that the extra detail work you're doing will have an effect to improve the overall look. It's still a cool explosion. It's a great shot.
Yeah, but what you're saying is they might as well not have gone to all that extra trouble.
Yeah, I mean, how long do you reckon it took? Say an hour or 45 minutes for each of the 180 model rooms?
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of work.
Well, you top that up. That is a long time. That's probably 2 or 3 people doing it for a whole week or maybe more. Poor buggers. Anyway, amazing that they went to the effort, and it, the overall effect on Captain Scarlet, it does feel like another step up.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that sort of thing happened multiple times where they went to all sorts of effort, blew something up, and then you never saw half the work that was done, or it all went wrong and they had to start all over again.
Yeah.
Just one of the problems when you're doing model effects work.
Yeah, quite right. Who would work with them, eh? Models, animals, and children.
Anything, in fact.
Yeah, sure.
Anything in film
People,
and TV. Disaster.
Other actors.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, dear. Well,
directors.
Yeah. Right, well, we better stop doing this. Podcast hosts, I mean...
who'd work with them?
Eh?
Wow.
Right, Richard, before we descend into P45s, let's bring this one to the end. So that's the end of this week's Bang Fact!
Very nice. I enjoyed that one.
Good.
Just amazing.
So
just those hours and hours of work gone for nothing. It's very similar, isn't it, to the amount of preparation, time, and thought that goes into these podcasts.
Yeah, you're
as
absolutely
I collate
right.
the various emails and tweets. And, it's such hard work, Jamie. It takes me the best part of a week, and all for what? What's the thanks I get?
to be destroyed by me.
Yes. Anyway, talking of which, we do have some emails that were sent into podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Firstly, here's a lovely one from Deborah Ribardo, who says, "Greetings, gentlemen, from across the pond."
Greetings.
She says, yes, success. After starting late in 2019, I've finally caught up on listening to the Gerry Anderson podcast. A belated congratulations on your 100th pod, and you're well on your way to another 100 podcasts. It has been a delight listening to the antics and witty banter of each pod on my commute into work, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all the guest interviews. Oh, she even says fab facts. Quick fire 5. Plot of peril, news, and of course a randomiser. I came to the Anderson worlds a bit later than many of the other Podsterons via a happy accident whilst looking for family-friendly space-themed shows for my daughter. As you can guess, we happened across Fireball XL5. It was phenomenal. In my opinion, says Deborah, David Holt summed up the Anderson shows best. Cinematic. The characters and voices, the stories, the sets with such incredible detail, some of which you actually see when they get exploded, the music, each part like a beautifully crafted puzzle piece, all seamlessly fitting together to create an equally wonderful and fantastic show. From Fireball XL5, we jump to Captain Scarlet, which continues to be my daughter's favourite. So much so, she's introduced the show to her friends and even dressed as the titular character for her school's fall festival.
Brilliant.
We continued then onto Joe 90, the Secret Service, and then back around to Supercar, Stingray, and finally Thunderbirds. Although harder to find here in the US, we've been able to collect a few comics, books and toys, including a dinky SPV. To say that we've become obsessive is a bit of an understatement. Although we've not watched any of the live-action shows, they're on the binge list. Thanks for your time and for keeping the Anderson legacy alive. The world needs more shows such as these, and we are eagerly awaiting Firestorm. Eternally rambling, Deborah. Nope, not rambling at all, Deborah. Thank you for that lovely email. It's the same we always say. Kids still love this stuff.
Absolutely. And always will, I suspect.
Yeah.
But it's always nice when it's discovered via happy accident or, just random introduction, all that sort of thing. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And can you imagine that moment, though, when you randomly stumble over one thing, let's say Fireball XL5, and you realise that there's a whole series of that, and then you realise that there are more series of other stuff made by the same team in the same sort of universe. I mean, what a joy.
Yeah, potentially hundreds of episodes to enjoy then. Just from that one discovery. And that's kind of what we're hoping for with all the stuff that we do through the YouTube channel and the podcast and our tweets and Facebook things and Instagram and everything else like that. It's just to help people find a window into the worlds of Gerry Anderson.
Indeed. There we are. Also, David Berg got in touch. Hi, Jamie and Richard. What a fantastic treat listening to your podcasts. A bit late to the party. I'm listening through your podcast archive and I'm finding the productions very unique in a good way, he says.
Nice, thanks.
I grew up with a rich Gerry Anderson-tastic childhood. I remember watching some Captain Scarlet and Joe 90 before I was 9. My family then moved to New Zealand, where I encountered Space 1999 in the mid-70s. We moved back to the UK just before Terrorhawks was aired, and this was where I have vivid memories of Stingray and Thunderbird reruns during the afternoon matinees on TV. Most of UFO eluded me during my formative years, but in later life I've subsequently found Doppelganger, as well as UFO and Space 1999 again, through the brilliant releases by Network. And then he says, I completely missed Space Precinct. Sorry, Richard. As this was around the time my daughter was born. Fair enough. But I recognised the importance of both Terrorhawks puppets and Space Precinct animatronics in the evolution of the art form. Of course, Firestorm takes it all to the next dimension. Fantastic. Anyway, after listening to Pod 22, I have another striking bobble hat suggestion. It's the hottest day of the year. Anyway, that's great. He says, how about a grey hat with a random pattern of small black outlined ovals and a bobble hat that comprises a combination red, orange and yellow? It would be adorned with embroidered lettering spelling, yep, you guessed it, breakaway. Who knows? Just some thoughts. Anyway, thank you both for your dedication and hard work in bringing us this extraordinary podcast. Yours faithfully, Dave from Gloucestershire. Thank you for that, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for listening in.
Yeah.
A breakaway
much
beanie.
For a bobble hat?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, do you know what? Right now, I'll let you on a little secret, Richard. We are currently working on this year's Christmas jumper designs. Plural,
Right.
yes, you heard that right.
Wow.
I mean, that is really weird doing it when it's about 30 degrees outside.
Yeah.
I'm sat here in my shorts and a t-shirt, and here we are firing Christmas jumper designs back and forth. So we are thinking ahead to the end of the year, and absolutely that will go on the pile of potential ideas. So
very good.
Cheers, Dave from Gloucester.
Yeah, lovely. More emails later and some tweets and Facebook posts, of course. Get in touch with us at podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk.
Please do that. In the meantime, should we have some Gerry Anderson news?
Yes.
Then let's have that.
News.
Thank goodness for that. What would it be without you saying those words?
I know. Well, would it be much shorter for a start? Yeah.
It would be considerably so. Okay, well, let's first of all tune to Radio 3, Richard.
Right.
BBC Radio 3. Some of our Podsterons may have heard this over the weekend, but on Saturday, just gone, I was a guest on Matthew Sweet's Sound of Cinema show on Radio 3, talking all about Barry Gray. Now, I must apologise in advance because two problems happened. One, during the recording, Ernie, the little dog, who listeners may have heard me mention before, decided that he wanted then to have all the fuss in the world, then wanted to go out for a wee, then wanted to tear up some stuff in my office, then wanted to make a bed out of some paper. So I was constantly interrupted.
Oh dear.
So you may hear some little sounds of scratching or collar shaking. And also, Matthew Sweet is so bright, so well read, and so intelligent that I absolutely felt like a total dunce on his show. So
now you know how I feel.
When you're on the Sound of Cinema. So I think probably there's a lot of stuff I really wanted to say about how brilliant Barry was and didn't quite get out there. So I hope the show does him justice. I'm sure it does from Matthew's point of view. And it ends with something very special to me, which is the Crispin Morell's piano rendition of the end theme from Stingray, Aquamarina, that was played at Dad's funeral as a sort of couple of moments to reflect on his life. So it's a very special piece to me. It was great that Matthew and his producer Chris agreed to play that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. So if you want to listen to that, I think it's available currently via the BBC Sounds app, or just via the BBC Radio 3 website, or just search Sounds of Cinema, I think.
Okay.
Or is it Sound of Cinema? One of the two.
I don't know.
You'll find it. And we'll even put a link in the show notes on this very podcast.
Lovely.
So, yes, and thanks to Matthew for having me. Richard, let's make it about you for a moment.
Oh, at last.
You've been doing a lot of voice work recently.
Yeah, have I?
Yeah, you've been reading things and you've been in Zero X, but
that's true.
Let's tackle one of the things you've been reading first.
Right.
Space Precinct Demeter City is finally available from bigfinish.com and via the Gerry Anderson store. Tell us about Space Precinct Demeter City, Richard. What is it? What have you done? Why have you done it? And do you need to apologise for it?
Well, I should hope not. Space Precinct Demeter City was the unbroadcast, unfilmed, unshot pilot episode to Space Precinct. Never made, written by Paul Mayhew Archer. And actually it's quite interesting because it detailed the journey that Lieutenant Brogan took from his home beat in New York with the NYPD to Altor and Demeter City and Precinct 88. So it's a story that's never been told before. And I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity by Jamie to adapt it into a short novel and to narrate it for an audiobook, which has just been released.
What a great summary. Now, there is a clip out in the world where you do a most excellent Captain Podley. It's so good. I think we should give Podsterons an exclusive excerpt, Richard. So,
yes.
Where else do you think we could draw from in the book?
How about this? The next morning was much like any other. 2 suns rose above Demeter City, and Captain Podley was at his desk. "I see," he barked. "Thank you." He leaned forward to stab at a button on his desk. A screen went blank. "Suicide." Brogan stood before him. His eyes were narrow. Podley nodded. "He hanged himself. The guy was facing 50 years on one of the deep space prison hulks. He took the easy way out." Brogan wasn't convinced. He kept his thoughts to himself. Sure. "And meantime, Lieutenant, life must go on." The old Creon rose to look out his window. He parted the blinds with his 3 fingers. "I fixed up the first lesson in your basic driving course. You're to go to the vehicles bay." Brogan was affronted. Basic driving course? I've been on the simulator for the last month. No way am I going on some basic driving course. Podley turned, scowling at his new lieutenant. Brogan held his gaze for a moment, then turned to the door. As he strode along the corridor, eyes down, sulking, he almost ran into Haldane. "Oh, hi, Brogan. You going someplace?" His partner had never looked so fed up. A basic driving course. Brogan noticed Haldane chuckling. Yeah. You'll get your turn." He pulled the young cop closer. "And listen, the barman's dead." Haldane's eyes widened. "They say suicide," Brogan continued, looking around him, "but I don't buy it." He reached into a pocket and pulled out the computer printout they'd found on the barman. "We've got to find out who sent this message. See if it's logged on the computer. We have to know."
Cool. He's quite good, that Richard James bloke, isn't he?
Oh, actually, it was really very nice. It's a funny, it's 25 years ago, really, since I've given much thought to the series, apart from, chatting to the likes of you and fans of the show.
The likes of you.
Yeah, So to immerse myself, actually, in that world again was really quite lovely and amazing how it felt like it was literally just beneath the skin still after all these years. It was very strange. But yeah, great fun to do. Lovely to try and bring life to all the characters that we know so well, and obviously pay tribute to, well, particularly Jerome Willis, who's no longer with us, who played Captain Podley. That was a lovely thing to do, to bring Podley to life again in my own inimitable fashion. But yeah, good fun. So thanks for the opportunity, Jamie. Really, really enjoyed that.
Not at all. I hope there will be more in the future.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say.
Wink, wink. Just a quick question. I'm making this rather a long news item, but I did want to ask you genuinely. So the excerpt from Podley's office, which we haven't heard but is available elsewhere on the Gerry Anderson store, etc., etc., you've got details in there about Podley's office.
Oh, yeah.
And things like, you say, a photo of him and his daughter together. Things like that. Are those elements that stuck in your head from the original show, or did you have to go back and watch a few episodes to refresh your mind about the kind of the layout and the look of Podley's office and that kind of stuff?
Oh, no, I didn't have to watch a single thing.
Amazing.
It's strange. It's still there. I mean, I can describe Podley's office to you now. I was in there so many times.
Yeah.
What's interesting, of course, was being able to see little things, because in that first pilot script, there wasn't a picture of Podley and his wife and daughter, because we'd yet to discover that. That came his daughter much later in the series. So it's very nice to be able to use stuff that came later on in the series and put it in the pilot episode, if you see what I mean. Yeah, but I do specifically remember the golfing trophy. It was a crayon. I mean, it must be somewhere. It was a crayon.
I remember
lovely
it.
kind of a bronze look trophy. Yeah, a crayon playing golf. Yeah, amazing how it all comes back, isn't it? But also, I have to say, very nice responses on Twitter as well. If I'm allowed to, Jamie, I'd just like to read out a couple that caught my eye.
So you're reading out reviews on this podcast about your own work?
Well, why not? Yeah,
brilliant.
Sure,
Do it.
Well, Robert Monk, for example, actually got in touch on the Facebook page and said, "I didn't know Wogan played Podley." I mean, come on. They're not 1,000 miles apart, I'll grant you.
No, your Podley's great. That's you're selling yourself short there.
Sam said on Twitter, "Just finished listening to Demeter City, an excellent adaptation and reading by Richard James. It's a shame this script never made it to the screen, as it would have made a good introduction to the series. I now want to watch Space Precinct again. Highly recommended." Job done, I'd say. Seb Bird said, "After listening to the brilliant Space Precinct audiobook, Demeter City, I'm now inspired to have a go at impressions of characters from the show." Great, Seb. Right, put them online. Let's hear them. And finally, Steve Jenko tweeted, "So, let me get this right. You were actually in Space Precinct?" Well, you could have mentioned it. I know. I like to keep it quiet.
You do a very good job at keeping it quiet. Well done. So yes, you can go grab that now from bigfinish.com or from the Gerry Anderson store, and I highly recommend that you do. If you're already a Big Finish customer and you listen to your stuff through the Big Finish app, then get it through Big Finish. Don't get it through the Gerry Anderson store. But if you want to listen to it on any device generally, or you're not already a Big Finish customer, then get it from either. Now, Richard, you've also been in, bloody hell, so much stuff.
Oh, I know,
You've been in blooming Zero X as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was asked. I mean, I'm very available
I
at the
thought
moment.
you just
I'll do anything.
turned up and started reading in, and people were like,
Well,
oh,
pretty
well, I
much,
must be here. Yeah, Zero X Part 3, the end of the Planet of Bone story, should be out now, subject to it all coming together in time. I think it has. We'll have to wait and see. If not, it'll be out very soon. But to celebrate the end of that little trilogy first story, you can now pick up some Zero X merch on the Gerry Anderson store. Just search Zero, the word Zero, X, letter X. I don't know how else you'd spell X.
No.
ECKS.
It could be that.
Yeah, don't search that. You won't find anything. Go and have a look there. And obviously, well done to the cast, and particularly to Chris Thompson, who has kind of spearheaded and animated and basically done the whole thing. So
yeah,
well done, Chris. More to come there. But we've had so much lovely feedback on just how it's been brought to life and how nostalgic it is. I showed it early doors to Nick Briggs, Voice the Daleks, that bloke from Rival Podcast, etc.
Yeah.
I can't read his response to you because it was so full of expletives, but let me tell you that those expletives were firmly in the positive. So
that's nice to hear. Good.
It is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
And finally, for this very lengthy, very chatty news item.
Sorry about that.
Just wanted to... No, not at all. I absolutely... I really wanted to know about that thing about Space Precinct and all that sort of stuff. But before we go... If you are looking to get hold of the Thunderbirds soundtrack, which is out in about 10 days, 2 weeks' time, I highly recommend, if you want the vinyl copy, you grab that ASAP. They are selling like hotcakes, and it's a limited first edition run of 750 units. I would suspect that is going to sell out before release, so do not wait. Go and grab it. The CD will be available longer. And also, people have been asking me for the last few podcasts, actually, where they can hear the digital versions of these releases. I didn't think they had been released digitally, but somebody's emailed to tell me that they are on Spotify. So if you're looking to access the silver screen Barry Gray releases, they should be, allegedly, on Spotify. That might vary by territory, but there you go. There's a way to listen to them if you don't want to pick up a physical copy. Oh, that was long, wasn't it? I think we should stop and move on to the next section. So that is the end of this week's Gerry Anderson News.
That was the news. That was the news. There we are.
Beautiful.
More next week, of course. All sorts of stuff going on. It's strange, isn't it? It's very quiet in the rest of the world, although it seems to be waking up from its slumber and coming to life, but still lots of stuff happening in the Gerry Anderson universe. Now, I want to head on over to our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Podsterons, where Willow posted a rather nice post to the members there, explaining that none of us should be ashamed or ridiculed for the things that we love. And that's a big hear from me as well, specifically in the Gerry Anderson universe. And Tony Freeman responded to that with a rather lovely post that I asked him if it'd be okay to read out, and he said yes, of course. So he wrote this: at 61 years old, I've endured all sorts of ridicule throughout the years from people who simply don't get it. It's mostly from those type of men and women that sheepishly follow the usual set of trends that you see wheeled out decade after decade. The moment you step outside of the box and dare to do or to think or become something different, that's when the ridicule starts. But that's also when your life truly begins to fly. It doesn't matter if your passion is art, literature, poetry, music, or the worlds of Anderson, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars and so on. It's what informs you, develops you, and changes you for the better. It stays with you through thick and thin, through those dark times, and gives you both joy and hope, and helps lead you back to the light. Those who follow the trends so sheepishly will eventually have nothing in their lives, nothing but an empty space, relying on others to fill it, whilst yours will always be full and enriched. The fact that your life, our lives, are so much richer for TV shows which are primarily based around puppets makes them and you even more remarkable. Never ever give up on your love of these shows, and certainly never ever apologise for loving them. And there's a big hear from me, and I suspect from Jamie.
Absolutely. Gosh, what a great and quite deep view of the whole thing.
Yes.
But no, I
never
completely
apologise.
Agree. Yeah, no, normally if people find fandoms weird or unusual or whatever, it's because they don't have any kind of passion like that in their own lives.
Yes.
It's sad.
I agree. It's because they haven't found it. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And when they do, they'll suddenly go, oh, now I understand it. So yes. Here. Thank you, Tony. Lovely words. And
lovely post
beautifully
indeed.
delivered by Richard James, I think you'll find. No, lovely audition there, Richard. I'm sure you'll be pronounced
again.
you're real, won't you?
Yep, definitely. So yes, do pop along to our Facebook group. Always fun going on there. Join in with the games and silliness and nonsense, and also a little bit of seriousness every now and then as well. Facebook.com/groups/Podsterons.
Beautiful. I think we should move on to Morgan Jeffery, don't you?
Oh, yeah, okay, that'd be great.
Because he's a nice chap, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
He is, and he had some lovely
Especially
views.
Without the beard.
Now he's had his hair cut and he's exited caveman styling. No, Morgan was brilliant last week, and this is part 2 of his interview. He is acting executive editor for RadioTimes.com. I think that's right. Sorry, Morgan, if I got that wrong. and he was a Digital Spy, and he's an Anderson fan, and he came to it in the 90s, and he doesn't really like Thunderbirds. Shock horror.
Yes.
Or
Wow.
didn't really like Thunderbirds that much, like the other shows. So yeah, more of Morgan's love of Anderson stuff, and how he places Anderson stuff in a modern entertainment context, which I think is a really interesting viewpoint, especially right now. So here he is, Morgan Jeffery, part 2. So after Space Precinct, they're still showing a few bits and pieces in the 90s, and then Thunderbirds, I think Scarlet as well, gets a 2001 release. So you're still watching along there. I mean, how do you go from being a 10-year-old watching Space Precinct and other stuff that's being reshown on the BBC through to now, when you clearly have a broad and deep knowledge of all things Anderson and an appreciation which goes into the academic. Do I mean the academic? Maybe not. Yes, the academic and journalistic. So you're more in depth than a lot of people go. So how has that happened?
I feel like the academic may be paying me a compliment I don't necessarily deserve.
Keep it. It's yours.
Well, so yeah, I watched Scarlet, and I watched Space Precinct, and I watched Space 1999 when I was about 12, which I think that's probably about as young as you want to watch that first series of Space 1999.
Yes,
because I know everyone talks about Dragon's Domain, but it actually wasn't that one. It was Force of Life, the burnt husk with the glowing eyes. That was the one that really,
yeah, that is terrifying and brilliant.
Brilliant, fantastically done, but really gave me chills. And I should say the Big Finish adaptation of Space 1999, which I was lucky enough to visit the studio for when you guys were recording. That, I think, is one of the best things that Big Finish have ever put out in 20 odd years of audio production. But then after that, you get into sort of like the late 90s, the early 2000s, and I was about 13, 14, and then it's Lavender Castle, which again now I can really appreciate, but that was much aimed much more at younger viewers.
That was preschool, so yeah,
right. And so I'm heading into teenagehood, and so I did sort of drift away from Anderson at that point. They were fond childhood memories, but not something that I was really concerning myself with day to day. But I think that is quite common, that fans drift away from Anderson stuff in the teenage years, and then they rediscover it in adulthood.
Yeah.
And so it sort of started off as a curiosity, where you go, oh, what were those shows I used to watch? And then I found out that the worlds were so much more expansive than I had ever thought. So I would delve into then the earlier stuff, like I actively sought out the likes of UFO and Terrorhawks and Supercar and Fireball. A bit like I was saying earlier, rather than having those presented to me, they weren't as readily available. I actually had to go and seek those out, and then I started delving into the minutiae of your dad's career, and then it just became a bit of an obsession. I think I'm always fascinated by, obviously it's not one shared universe, but any hugely expansive fictional world. I always find that interesting. So it's part of the reason I'm like yourself, a big Doctor Who fan, is there's so much of it. I find it fascinating. I always can't wait to dive in and start exploring every aspect of the universe. And similarly with Anderson, when you see how many amazing shows and films your dad produced, that's incredibly exciting, because it's like, I've got so much to explore, and there's so much variety in there as well. So once I fell down that rabbit hole, I don't think I've ever come out. Still there now.
It's a nice, cozy place to live. So there are worse things to have an interest in, or even an obsession with.
I'd say obsession. I'd go so far as to say it's an obsession at this point.
Okay, fine. So you came to UFO and Terrorhawks as a grown-up, a proper, real, fully formed adult.
If you can call me that, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling you for today. So how did they feel? Because, I would say UFO and Terrorhawks live at very different ends of the spectrum of Anderson shows, and yet they're dealing with basically, the age-old Anderson story, alien invaders coming to do things, secret organization, blah, 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 blah. They're weirdly similar in theme. So what was the experience like of watching those? Do you want to tackle UFO first? Because that is grown-up stuff with a few old 60s, very retro, very old-feeling elements to it, but there's so much of it that still feels kind of relevant and cool.
Well, I think both UFO and Terrorhawks actually benefited from me watching them when I was a little bit older, because although aesthetically UFO is very much of its time, I think the themes that are contained within it are actually quite mature. And again, it can be quite unsettling at times. So I responded. I mean, it's hard to say, really. I may have watched it as a child and loved it, but I think I responded better to it as a slightly older viewer. And similarly, I think, but almost for the opposite reason with Terrorhawks, where because I was so self-conscious and anything that wasn't quite serious-minded child, anything that wasn't serious-minded, I rebelled against. I think I would have enjoyed, strangely, the earlier episodes of Terrorhawks more. And when it started to take itself less seriously, I think I may well have not enjoyed that so much. However, as an adult, I, of course, watched those first few episodes, and they definitely have their charms, the early Terrorhawks episodes. But I can much more appreciate the show when it just absolutely loses its mind a little bit later on and comes to appreciate the absurdity of its concept and its characters. That's when, famously, that's when that show really takes off. So I think it was actually a good thing that I watched both of those shows in my later years.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes it is to save the best for last.
You would say that about Terrorhawks, but yeah.
I wasn't specifying Terrorhawks. That could easily have been UFO. So do you think there is a place for forgetting any new stuff and any reboots or anything that's being made now? Is there a place? Because you're in a really good position to see what's being made currently, what's coming out. You're in a good place to see what the audience response is like to new material. Is there a place for classic Anderson stuff in contemporary TV and streaming market for adults or even for kids?
Yeah, without question. Because, as I was saying earlier, the market is more fractured now, which means it can be harder to promote a project. And, but having said that, it does mean that everyone's desires and interests are served. And there's clearly a big desire and a big hunger for archive television on streaming, which is really a great untapped market, it feels like to me at the moment. You have the likes of Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus pumping out all this new material. But really, there's no... BritBox is kind of cornering the market at the moment in terms of presenting archive material for streaming. And you saw just from the response that, I think it's 10 episodes of Thunderbirds and the pilots, some of the other shows, that going up on BritBox got a huge reaction on social media.
Yeah. And
the good thing is as well, it's not just hype. So that when people... Because you often find, if vintage television goes up on streaming or is in some way available and audiences revisit it or they visit it for the first time having heard about it and it doesn't live up to the expectations, doesn't live up to the legacy. And the Anderson stuff absolutely does. So there's definitely a place for it in the modern streaming market. The desire is there, clearly. We saw that from the response that just having a select number of episodes on BritBox, the response that got. But also, as I've discovered from revisiting some of the shows recently, especially the ones on Blu-ray, they still hold up. They look fantastic. The music by Barry Gray is still incredible. The performances hold up. The stories, for the most part, hold up. So, yeah, I think were archive Anderson material to end up on streaming, it would not only please the diehard fans, but I genuinely think it would have a great opportunity at finding a new audience. And as you were saying, maybe we could see another resurgence along the lines of the 90s boom and the early 2000s boom in a way that we probably won't see because it's not going to get a traditional television airing.
Yeah. So it might be a slightly kind of softer peak to interest, but hopefully this could be something sustained. It's certainly got that potential, isn't it? Because it's out there, it's shareable. It's no longer event kind of, we've got to watch this because they're re-showing it and then it'll be gone again. But now, hopefully, there's a chance for it to snowball a bit.
Yeah, well, that's TV in general. I mean, event television is becoming more and more rare. There are still shows that do it, where you get 10 million viewers on BBC One on a weekday evening. But for the most part, people aren't watching live television as much. They're not watching the same channels as much. That whole idea of water cooler television, everyone watching the same thing and talking about it the next day at work, that doesn't exist as much. It's more pockets of conversation that happen in real life, but also on social media. So you may not see, let's say all of the Anderson archive went up on some streaming service tomorrow, you may not see quite the boom that you did in the 90s and the 2000s, but I think you would, as you say, see a kind of groundswell of support on social media and hopefully out in the real world as people gradually discover or rediscover those shows and talk gets around.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's see what happens, because it's starting. There are 15, 16 episodes up currently across a few series. Weird way to do it. I would have thought they would just start the whole thing up, but hopefully it'll build.
Hopefully it's a taster. They're just, testing the waters, dipping their toe into the Anderson waters. And when they see the reaction, and I don't know what the figures are like, but I can only imagine, going by the social response, that they're good. Hopefully the licensing will allow them to put up more episodes, and the word of Anderson will spread.
Yeah, and maybe even Terrorhawks and Space Precinct in due course.
I'd love Space Precinct to go up on streaming and get a second life, or possibly a reappraisal from some people. It
definitely needs that.
If the cold black heart of Nick Briggs can be melted, then surely anyone can be convinced. Anyone can become a Space Precinct fan.
I think you're possibly absolutely right. Last few questions from me. If you could, regardless of anything that's been announced or is in development or pre-production, whatever right now, if you could take any Anderson concept and bring it back, reboot it, turn it into a new film, but you're only allowed one chance, one shot at this, what would it be?
I think it would be Scarlet. I think because there's a lot of interesting ideas in the original Scarlet that don't always get explored to full capacity. So there's things like, why do Spectrum and Captain Blue, why do they so readily accept this alien clone of their agent and treat him like he's the same man? And some of these concepts are actually, like in New Scarlet, actually they do get explored a little more. But I think Scarlet would probably lend itself to a reboot, because it's, on paper it's a very clear idea. It's humanity versus the alien invaders, but also there's plenty of themes there that you could dig into, possibly in a way that would work for modern audiences. There's darkness there. There's ideas of identity and being replaced, and you could. It depends how deep you want to get into it, but you could. I feel like this is now web therapy, but you could explore the idea of, like, who is Scarlet? Who is this new Scarlet? He's not really the original man, but then he has all the memories of the original. So does that make him the same man? And similarly with Captain Black, and to what extent the original Captain Black is still within this zombified antagonist. And again, those were things that New Scarlet did indeed explore a little more than the original. But I just think there's so much potential for interesting character and theme exploration with a reboot of Scarlet, plus Spectrum versus the Podsterons and big explosions and cool gadgets and FPVs and all of that.
It ticks all the boxes for you.
Yeah, it ticks absolutely all the boxes.
Okay. On the other end of the, saying Spectrum again, on the other end of things, which single Gerry Anderson show ticks the least boxes for you? Which one that you've seen, did you just go, I don't get it, or it doesn't appeal, or there's something missing? And let's exclude Twizzle and Torchy from this. Right.
Well, I was going to say, Twizzle and Torchy, their early efforts, they're not really aimed at me. I'm not sure who Torchy was aimed at, a lot of it. But I think, and you may well like my answer too, I think it is Joe 90.
Yes! Win.
Only because it comes after Scarlet in the run. Mm-hmm. So that's, for me, that's the original Captain Scarlet and the Podsterons is my favourite Anderson show, so it sets a high bar. And then Joe comes after it. And again, it is a show that I enjoy more, actually, as an adult viewer. But I think at the time, it felt like the epitome of a show that was being aimed at a younger audience. The idea that they brought in a youth lead character, it felt a bit like they were trying too hard to appeal to that younger audience. And it was a show that, and I love James Bond movies. That's another of my big obsessions. And so on paper, much as Anderson does superheroes with Captain Scarlet, I loved it. Anderson does a version of James Bond should have really appealed to me. And a lot of Joe at the time, it just, I think because of the central character, just fell a little bit flat. So I would say Joe 90 only because on paper it should really appeal to me, and in reality doesn't quite have the same charm for me as Thunderbirds and Scarlet, and even Stingray. I say Stingray's a bit of an odd outlier in that I talked about responding to sophistication and serious-mindedness when I was younger, but then I also absolutely loved Stingray, which when you look back at it now is actually less sophisticated than Thunderbirds. But I think with that one, I loved Barry Gray's music. I love the theme that caught my attention.
The music is so brilliant in Stingray. It's really lovely.
Although, again, I loved the opening theme.
Yes.
Did not like at all Aquamarina at the time because I think because it was a love song.
Yeah, it's really sappy, wasn't it?
Yeah, soppy. And as a child, I didn't want romance. I wanted submarines and missiles and the lot of
explosions.
Yeah. So that is a bit of an outlier, but I think Stingray is just very, very charming.
Yeah, and it had a heightened look and feel to it that meant it could get away with the kind of more campy, less sophisticated elements. Because I rewatched the pilot a couple of days ago, and I haven't seen it for years, like 10 years, and it was so enjoyable.
Yeah,
even though it's got a slight naffness to it, in a way that I just don't find Joe enjoyable. And that's not to say that nobody can enjoy Joe. Everybody's free to love Joe 90 if they do. Equally, you're free not to like it.
I feel like anything I say about Joe 90 will be dwarfed by the fact that I said I didn't enjoy Thunderbirds, which that's going to be the main takeaway from this episode. I think everyone's going to really pile on.
There are plenty of people who love the live action shows and don't like the puppet stuff. There's plenty of people who love Scarlet over Thunderbirds. Then, like, definitely things you come to expect.
Everyone loves Thunderbirds, right? I'm bringing something new to the table by saying it's not my favourite.
Okay, you're bringing something new to the table by saying you love Space Precinct, Morgan. That's what you brought today.
Unashamedly.
No, it's quite right too. So final thing from me. Again, because you've got this overview of the entertainment landscape and you've turned an interest and enjoyment from childhood into a profession, together with your academia, Professor Morgan Jeffery. Is there anything you think that Dad brought to his shows across the decades which is now not present in the current entertainment landscape? Is there something from those shows which is lacking? There's a kind of Anderson vacuum currently present, or is every element kind of ticked, fulfilled? We've got all the content we need. Who needs Anderson now?
Oh no, I would never dare say that. No, I think
not on this podcast anyway.
Yeah, if you want that, listen to my podcast. No, I think again, I feel like there's a generation or an age bracket that's underserved at the moment in children's television. So if you look at children's television, and this is a sweeping generalization, it's not true, it's not entirely true, but I think there's a lot of content for very young kids, and then there's content out there for slightly older audiences, as they get to be about 13, 14, and because then you've got stuff for very young kids, and then by the time you're like 12, 13, 14, you're basically watching Marvel movies, right? All of cinema right now is basically for 13-year-olds and up, but that's kind of the stage at which you can start watching that. And I feel like there's an underserved age bracket, which is that kind of like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, which is the age at which I discovered Anderson originally. So I think that's what's missing, and that's what, at least with the early stuff, the Super Mario Nation stuff, that's what your dad was serving. And I also think that there was a purity of vision to the Anderson stuff. Your dad was essentially, I mean, I'm sure it was more complicated than this, but the legend is Lou Grade would just say, Gerry, go and make the show. I trust you. Go do it.
Pretty much.
And now it's that idea that a camel is a horse made by committee, and there's too many cooks. And of course, there's some great things being made, but you kind of feel like very few things are made with the kind of purity of vision that Anderson shows were made with. There was such, quoting Willy Wonka, there's just pure imagination, I think, at the heart of every Anderson show. And I think actually, owing a lot to that partnership with Lou, it was the fact that your dad had to keep reinventing all the time, because as much as it would have been nice to have more Thunderbirds, if Thunderbirds had continued, we wouldn't have had Captain Scarlet. If UFO had continued into a second series, we wouldn't have had Space 1999. So the onus was always on your dad to keep reinventing, even though there are some, as you said, familiar themes that keep, ideas that keep cropping up. But he did have to keep coming up with new formats and new executions, and he just did it. He did it brilliantly, time and time again. He delivered these shows that were so inventive and colourful and action-packed. And they all had real heart as well. So that's what I think is missing, that purity of vision and that freedom to be able to go out there and create something that is 100% yours. And all of those shows are 100%. Of course, they were huge team efforts, but those shows are 100% Gerry Anderson. Your dad took the idea in his head and assembled an amazing team of people around him and just made what he wanted to make. I think that's a bit special, and I don't think that quite exists in the same way these days.
100% agree on both counts. Perfect soundbite. I'm going to use that and play it to TV commissioners.
Let's not pretend like I have any sway or power over what they do.
Well, you never know. But you're right. There's so much by committee stuff going on. It's kind of painful, but yeah, there's definitely hope for future Anderson stuff. Anyway, let's not go into that. That's for the future. No. We've been reflecting on the past for now. Morgan, if people want to find you online and, follow you and see what you're on about and doing, how can they do that? Where should they do that?
So I'm on Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me, which is at Morgan Jeffery, Jeffery. And again, if you did want to check out the podcast that I make with my friend Tom, it's the Two Geeks, Two Beers podcast, twogeeks2beers.com, and at Two Geeks Cast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Perfect. And Anderson fans should listen to episode 1 and episode 44.
I mean, they should listen to all of them. They're all great.
Obviously.
But if you want to start off, if you want to ease yourself in with the Anderson-themed episodes, happily enough, the first ever episode is our Terrorhawks episode, and then episode 44, we got you in, Jamie.
Sorry about that.
So if they want to have a listen to that one as well, it's actually a really interesting chat with some great insights into your dad's work.
Perfect. And it's the reason we got Gary Newman on the podcast as well back in episode 6. So
yes, we introduced you to the idea that Gary was an Anderson fan, and then I remember you DMing me shortly afterwards and being like, "I'm on to Newman's agent. I think it's going to happen," and then it happened. So very happy to have sort of made that happen for you.
Yeah, no, you totally did it. Without you, it wouldn't have happened. So thank you. It's one of our most popular interviews as well. Anyway, Morgan, thank you. You've been awesome, and I'll see you in the real world soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Thank you, Morgan Jeffery. Do follow him on Twitter. Chat. Just search for Morgan Jeffery. Just remember it's Jeffery, Jeffery, not Jeffrey. And then you'll definitely find him. He's always tweeting interesting stuff, and did some nice self-deprecating tweets last week about his appearance, if you saw those. And it's not the case that we ran out of interviewees at all, Morgan Jeffery, as you will hear in the coming weeks, but just that we wanted a different perspective, and I think we got it right there.
Absolutely right, yeah.
And for another different point of view, next week, we've got a lady.
Right, okay.
We are a little bit short of female interviewees on the podcast, and that's not for want of trying. It just seems to be the way of the world a little bit. You know, these shows tend to be more boy skewing, but we absolutely love and respect our female fans and female audience. Yep. And one of those members is Joan Marie Verber. Now, you've heard me mention her name multiple times over the last 10 or so podcasts because thanks to one of our Podsterons tipping us off about a series of books which I was previously unaware of, I went hunting for Joan's books. Those Thunderbirds books that she still had in storage, made their way to the store, have sold to lots of people all over the world, which has been brilliant, and then everyone's been reading them. But Joan wrote 6 Thunderbirds novels in the late noughties and early 2010s, which were released under license and included a prequel story about Jeff and then one story about each of the boys. Anyway, I sat with Joan online, obviously remotely because she's in the US, and we chatted for about half an hour about her introduction to all things Anderson and to how she ended up writing 6 Thunderbirds novels. She's got all sorts of fascinating insights, and it's also some tips for fan fiction writers who aspire to get their work published. So really, really interesting chat coming next week. So you can all look forward to that.
Great. Well, that sounds lovely. Very nice.
It was, thank you. I feel like you're going to spring a quickfire 5 on me or something, but...
Oh, if only I thought of that.
You just make me nervous.
No, sorry. Sorry about that. Maybe next week. Anyway, I do have an email here from Mark Wilson, however, who's got in touch. podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk to say, so, since Sunday, I've been on a major Stingray box set binge, and I've just completed the final episode. I have to say, I've genuinely, thoroughly enjoyed every episode all over again, and the more I've watched it, the more I've realised that Stingray might actually be my favourite Gerry Anderson series. Thunderbirds was introduced to me first by my dad, and I have to say I've always considered it as untouchable, but you just can't get away from the intensity of the Stingray theme song. It just has you gripped from start to finish, along with the Barry Gray scores throughout the episodes, and then Stingray itself. What a genius, beautiful design it is. Although Troy isn't my favourite character, I can forgive this minor issue that I have. Phone's such a likeable character and actual hero of the series. Marina, Atlanta, Shaw, Fisher, all great. The Glorious Titan, X-20, superb villains. So there you have it. I consider Stingray, not Thunderbirds, my favourite Gerry Anderson series. Shocked myself a bit with this discovery, says Mark. Oh, interesting. So I would like to know, have you ever been shocked by your favourite Gerry Anderson series? Have you ever thought, well, I'll just sit down in front of Joe 90 and give it a go? Hang on a minute, this is blooming brilliant! Or have you been a bit ambivalent about Space Precinct, sat down with the old box set and then suddenly thought, this is the best Anderson show ever? Do let us know, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk.
Well, Nick Briggs has been there recently with Space Precinct.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yes, that has certainly happened. I just want to say, Richard, by the way, that after you tried to spring that quickfire 5 on me that never happened.
Yes.
I checked my heart rate on my Fitbit, and it literally made the sound of the siren made it leap from my resting heart rate, which is about 60-ish, to 90 beats a minute. That's honestly how much of an unpleasant adrenaline shot that siren gives me.
Right.
So please don't do that.
Okay.
My heart rate's just about returned to normal now after that unpleasant shock.
All right. So, look out for next week, that's what I'll say.
Oh, no. Okay, well, lovely email. Thank you, Mark. Now, do you want to open the floodgates to the randomiser?
What now?
And
are you sure? Is everything tied down?
I believe so, and we can let Chris's genius wash over us and make us feel thoroughly ashamed for all the rubbish we've been talking
so
about
silly.
to now.
Yeah, good idea. Let's do
Okay,
that.
over to you, Chris.
This is the life, Millie.
Now you just relax, Henry. We're on a beautiful island. Now just enjoy it.
Yeah, just think. Not another person within 300 miles of us.
Henry, someone's at the window.
Well, how could it be? We're completely alone on this island.
Henry, it's there again.
Oh, it's all right. It's only me. Knock, knock.
Well, what did I say, Henry? I knew that there was someone.
Yes, well.
A strange, unearthly face.
Oh. Well, I just thought I'd stop by
You fiend.
to see if you guys might like to press the button on the randomiser for me today, actually.
Henry, you must stop him.
Hush, Millie. Do just as he says. He means business.
Well, you don't have to if you don't want to.
I don't scare easy.
Does that mean you will?
Let's take a look.
Be careful, Henry.
All right, Millie. All right.
Ah, thank you. I only thought of stopping by to see you because Marina said you are both really nice people.
Oh, that girl's tops.
Oh, isn't she just? Does that mean we're all friends now?
You must be crazy. Just crazy.
I guess not. Right, let's see what we have today. Well, it's the Protectors.
Oh, Henry.
You can't just sit there and watch them.
Well, I kind of sort of do.
You crazy fool.
I knew I should have sent the toy fish instead. Here's Think Pack. So welcome back to the Protectors. Although we were here not too long ago with It Could Be Practically Anywhere on the Island, I think we all prefer to discount this, or discount that even, because, well, you know. Anyway, as you can probably hear, it's a far more dramatic opening to this episode than that one. Harry and the Contessa just been in a car crash. Yep, Harry seems to have been thrown clear, but he's Oh,
Caroline.
Ambulance got there very quick. Almost suspiciously so, in fact. Now, there's a school of thought that says the shorter the pre-title sequence, very often the better the episode, because, you know, if you've got a really good hook, you don't have to spend too much time on it. It can just be, you know, bam, here it is. And that was a really good opening. The Contessa and Harry, both, driving along, and both looked a little worse for wear. And then crash.
And you were doing 60 when you were hit.
60? Ooh.
Car.
Now Harry's in hospital.
How are you feeling, Mr. Rule?
Never mind about me. What about Caroline?
Caroline?
Caroline, the Contessa di Contini. My passenger, the girl who was in the car with me.
This looks a bit suspicious.
Well, you're concussed, Mr. Rule. You're very confused. Your mind is playing tricks. There was no passenger in that car with you. You were quite alone when they picked you up.
Alone?
And where did Caroline go then?
No, there was a girl with me. I may be confused, but there was a girl there with me.
Yeah, we definitely saw her in there.
She must be there now, lying next to the road unconscious.
Not for 2 whole days, Mr. Rule. This is Monday the 4th. You were brought in here on Saturday the 2nd. You've been unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights.
2 days.
And this is an episode that was written by Brian Clements, who is a name very familiar to fans of British cult TV, mostly for work on things like The Avengers and The Professionals and such. But this was the only Anderson series he was ever involved with. Wrote 6 episodes of this. And his big
CID.
Sort of his idea for writing a series was to attack the premise, to go after the basic idea of the series. And I think this was probably the closest he ever got for the 6 episodes he wrote for the Protectors.
I want to report a missing...
And speaking of Brian Clements' prior work, we have a police inspector here.
Suppose I buy the fact that the Contessa was in the car with you.
Played by Ian Hendry, who was, of course, Patrick McNee's partner, Dr. David Keel, in the first season of The Avengers.
A bit drastic, isn't it?
And also, I always think when I watch Doppelganger, it would have been nice to have Ian Hendry back in an Anderson role again. And I keep forgetting that he did a Protectors episode, and he's quite good in there.
Back to my apartment with the Contessa, offering her a drink. Next thing I know, I'm driving. I'm very tired, like I've been driving a long time.
Returning from where?
You said you remember returning to your apartment.
Where from?
A case I was working on.
Oh, now look, I know you private people protect your clients' interests to the last ditch, but this case or whatever it is may have some direct bearing on the crash or whatever's happened to the Contessa.
It's possible.
Mr. Rule, I can't help you if I'm only holding half the cards.
Frank Dilling is due to testify before an international committee at the end of this week. He's going to present evidence that there's a network of official corruption that spreads halfway and back across the Western Hemisphere. He doesn't trust anyone. Not the government, not the police, not anyone. He came to us because we're private, because we're outside that world.
And you put him undercover?
That's right.
Look, if I've got any chance of finding the Contessa, I've got to go back to square one. I've got to find out where Frank Dilling is hiding.
Oh, all sounds a bit suspicious. Why are they so insistent on finding out where Dilling is?
Be leaving shortly.
Oh, and Harry has spotted that the nurse is wearing well, let's say that's not regulation hospital footwear.
I don't know. We decided to limit the information to one person. The Contessa and I flipped a coin and she won. She's the only one who knows where Frank Dilling is.
So he's cotton on to something not being quite right here. That's also reinforced by the shot of Hendry here. Ever since we noticed that the nurse is wearing the wrong kind of shoes, the camera angle is slanted.
As soon as I find anything out.
As if this hospital isn't quite on the level almost. And now Hendry and his sidekick are gone. Harry's going to take a look outside. Well, there's an ambulance and a nurse and a car. But it doesn't quite look like a hospital to him. It's 2:25. It looked like the watch said the 2nd, but...
Okay. We got a mover. Right away.
So now we're... A couple of lads here have got the Contessa. She's out on a bunk. Now Harry's going to have a look at his plaster cast leg. See if we can put some weight on that. Interestingly enough, it works fine. Well, it's fine as he can't move it, but looking outside. corridor seems normal enough, but there was a trolley there with
yellow plastic wheels. Oh!
Now Harry's hobbling down the corridor. And even though I remember this as being a good episode, I'm starting to think this may not be as effective on audio as I was perhaps hoping. Lots of sneaking around in silence. We'll try to keep you updated as to what Harry's discovering. Oh, this is interesting. Come to the end of a corridor, turned round, and suddenly it's not a real hospital anymore. It's just a pile of junk and some very 70s wallpaper, and it's curiouser and curiouser. Ah, now he's found the room where those guys were just a few moments ago holding the Contessa. Oh, he's a wily old bird, is Harry.
What do you think? He's going to work?
Got to.
Well, Mario might turn something up. Well, he's out turning Rule's place over, isn't he? He might find something.
Oh, and it's that stuntman guy. I can't remember his name because I always used to think his name was Frank Mayer, and Frank Mayer is a different stuntman. But this guy, whenever you see him in anything, you know he's going to end up in a fight. He was in The Prisoner quite a lot. Anyway, Tony is now. Oh no, Paul. I always do this on the randomizer. Tony Anholt turns up, and I call him Tony because he was Tony in Space 1999. Paul is here, and he's killed the stuntman dead because the stuntman was having a hunt around the house.
Harry? Suki!
Oh. Moaning from the bathroom. What could that mean?
Suki!
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 And much like with seeing Catherine Schell and Barry Morse together in Space 1999 a few weeks ago, it's strange to see Tony Anholt and Yuzuka Nagazumi together in this show a few years before they were together again on Space 1999. Anyway, the Contessa has now been set up in the hospital bed.
What happened to Harry?
Sedative.
And our doctor and nurse are
I'm not making any sense, but Harry...
again trying to convince her that she was found on her own.
Look, you must tell someone, please.
Very well.
Corley and Henry. I'm not sure how much of their fake hospital these bad guys have built, but Harry is roaming around the place quite unobstructed here. Someone's coming. Got to find somewhere to hide. Where can we go? Well, we've stumbled into a room with a car in front of a big screen. I'm realising as well at this point with the total silence on the episode soundtrack, I could just be making up any old nonsense. Turn on the screen. Projecting an image of a car coming towards them. Rather like the one they saw just before the crash. So that's how it was done. Say something. Come on. There's the loose spinning tyre, and we've got a blue flashing ambulance light. Everything you need to stage a car crash, in fact. So if you enjoy episodes with Robert Vaughn sneaking around, looking at things with a perplexed expression on his face, this is the episode for you, really. Oh, and the doctor guy has found that Harry has gone.
Get up!
Oh, that's it. Harry's had enough, smashed his cast against the pole holding up one of the tyres, and we're free of that. Nothing wrong with the old leg.
You, cover the ground. Whatever happens, he mustn't get upstairs. He must not reach that girl. He won't.
Oh, I've got a gun. Ha! Now, remember this episode... Oh, here we go. Contessa's got Ian Hendry come to see her.
What seems to be the trouble?
Well, I was in this accident. Now, they say that I was alone, but I wasn't. There was this man with me, and his name's Harry Rule.
But hold on. I think we'd better start from the beginning.
The music's got a bit more of a swagger to it now that Harry knows what's going on, and he's got his full mobility back. Oh, that's it. Harry's had enough. Time to punch somebody. And this episode also, This is, I suppose, a fairly simple idea that has turned up a few times in other things. I remember an episode of The Persuaders that starts off very similar to this, with Roger Moore finding himself in a hospital, supposedly having had an accident or something, and he slowly finds out that it isn't a real hospital. I'm not sure what episode that was.
Suki!
But it's quite effective here, except, again, that, the long stretches of silence don't really work on audio. But of course it wasn't designed to be on audio. And now Paul's found the
Look, you're asking me to do the impossible, Contessa.
the source of the reason the Contessa and Harry and now Suki were on, well, Dozy was a little snifter of drugged brandy.
We've got Mr. Rule to consider too. I mean, his life might be quite literally in your hands.
Well, Henry's doing a really good job here, because he's sort of pitching his performance slightly differently with the Contessa than he was with Harry earlier.
I'll tell you where Dilling is.
Harry has now stripped the Doctor of his clothes.
You will let me know, won't you? As soon as you hear anything.
Or the minute we find Dilling, Contessa, you'll know.
Oh, sorry.
Harry goes in, nobody comes out, right?
Right.
Let's put the Contessa's mind at rest, anyway. This episode is a masterclass in hiding. Harry keeps trying to get up these stairs, and every time he tries, someone else comes along he has to hide from. But he's on his way up to the Contessa's room now. Guy hiding behind the changing screen there with a gun. Oh, he's heard that.
You must be sweet on her. Me? I'd have been out across the ground straight away. Couldn't go without you, eh?
Thanks for telling me where she is.
It's not going to do you any good. A hero. I specialize in heroes. Dead heroes.
Yeah, you're tough. You're really tough.
What's that supposed to mean?
It might be a slight dig at your, the height of your belt. That's right. Oh, this guy looks so 70s, and I can't remember his name, but he's turned up in tons of things.
Saw me. But not you. You ramble on, you shoot off your big...
Oh. That's it, Harry taking his frustrations out on... they found each other.
He came from up there.
And I do get the feeling that these two genuinely don't just care about each other, but there is almost a love between them that doesn't get much focus through the series. I kind of wish it did more often. Anyway, that's it. Another thug punched out. The nurse is running away, but Contessa got in a good shot, lobbed the plant vase at her.
Harry, they did. Get what they wanted. I told them where we put Frank Dilling.
Oh, you idiot.
I've got to get to Dilling before they do.
Oh, is that the advert break point? 17 minutes in? Oh, okay. Normally they're sort of dead centre on like the 12-minute mark. Anyway, Henry and his assistant guy, they've tracked down where Dilling's hiding.
So that's the place you'd expect. It's closed down. Perfect place for a man to lose himself in.
Well, is it some kind of warehouse or studio?
Come on.
I believe this was a real film studio, I think. Hang on a second, I'm going to look that up. You enjoy more silence, seeing Henry's wandering around.
You mean we haven't lost 2 days?
That's right. Today is today. If you know what I mean. I mean, today is today's.
Yeah, I think so.
Today.
I mean, today we met Dilling, we put him away safely under wraps, and then we went back to your place afterwards for a drink.
That's when it started. The drink must have been spiked.
And we've been in a drugged haze ever since.
It's MGM Studios Elstree. And now we're stuck in traffic. Oh, I think we're outside Sainsbury's here. Harry and the Contessa have borrowed the ambulance.
Why pull something so elaborate? Why not just force the information out of us?
Because Brian Clements is writing this week, Caroline.
They wanted to play it cool. Drug-induced crash and subtle interrogation.
High concept. Great fun. Oh, God. That's it. Henry is into the old Elstree studio. We're going to find Frank Dilling somewhere.
It's an emergency.
Oh. Harry Rule has gone the wrong way up a one-way street.
Come on, what?
But as he says, it's an emergency.
Suki.
God, meanwhile, Paul is trying to shake some information out of Suki. Trying to force her to walk. It's interesting as well that Harry and the Contessa are now very much wide awake and alert, whereas Suki, who has done nothing, is is borderline catatonic. I'm not sure if that means that she had more to drink than they did, or if she was drinking quite extensively after they left, or if she's just useless. But, oh, you can see this is definitely an old studio of some kind. There's lots of, film props and such lying around. And now more sneaking around silently. Hendry and his assistant, they both got guns out, looking for Frank Dilling. Somewhere is hiding in this studio all by himself. I get the impression that they haven't left him much in the way of, like, supplies. He doesn't have a designated room or anything. He's just... Oh, there he is. He was hiding behind a pile of wood. Because, you know, when you hire the Protectors, you get the best. They will find a large empty space to... Where is he now? It looks like he's running along the side of a reservoir. Oh, he fell into the reservoir. Okay. And I have to say, I don't really much care whether Dilling escapes or not, because, you know, we don't really know anything about this guy. We know he's going to testify, but we don't really know who the man is. I don't think he actually gets a line of dialogue in this. Anyway, he's still managing to elude Hendry despite being useless.
Can you hear me? Wherever you are, stay put.
Oh.
We'll find you.
Thank you, bad voiceover of Harry. More sneaking around in silence. I was actually looking forward to this one when it came up on here, and I still think it's a good little run around, but it's not giving me much to work with on the randomizer when nobody is saying anything.
The studio, the old picture studios.
Good girl.
Oh, thank you, finally. I also wonder when people break into Harry's house, which happens, you know, fairly frequently in this show, where the dog is at times like this. Gus the dog. You see him in the opening titles every week, but curiously he's never around when someone breaks in to Harry's apartment. Not that I would want to put the dog in danger or anything, but I like the dog. Wish he turned up in a few more episodes, really. Anyway, Dilling is now making his way up a ladder inside Stage 3. I can tell that because it's got a skip outside with the word Stage 3 printed on it. But Hendry and his pal have followed him in there, and of course Dilling is, he's trying to hide as best he can, but unfortunately he's chosen an area with a great big red spotlight shining on him. Meanwhile, Harry and the Contessa are... Oh, door's closing, better get in there. Oh, that's so cool. So yeah, now Hendry is firing at Harry and the Contessa. This is a good series, by the way. I'm sorry we keep landing on things that either aren't very good or don't quite show off the strengths of the show enough. This is a good one. It's just it's not working on audio, and I'm sorry about that. Music's cool though. I do like this this bit of incidental music in particular. So the accomplice guy thinks he's found Dilling. Oh, Contessa's shining a light on him, and Harry's punching him. And that's Hendry having shot his own man. Despite me saying that Hendry puts in a good performance in this, he really doesn't need to. I said this is a very thankless role. Anybody could... I mean, that's the end of him. He hasn't even said anything through this entire scene. He's just had a red piece of wood dropped on him.
Main feature.
And Paul arrives too late to do anything.
It's okay, Dilling. You're back in our protective custody.
As effective as our protective custody clearly is. We'd understand if you'd want to go and find someone else to protect you from now on. Anyway, that was Think Back, and as I've said, I really enjoyed that one, but because it is something a bit different. I just struggled with this on audio. I'm really sorry about that. But go and give this one a watch. I would say this is probably in the top 10 episodes of the series, which may be yeah, some people may take that as sort of, oh, that's probably a sign the series isn't very good. It is very good. I'm sorry. We will get an episode that shows the strength of this series one day.
Well,
yeah,
the Protectors.
Yes.
In the avenues and alleyways.
Oh, there they are.
Well, Chris kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Top 10, maybe, he says, but he's still saying that is not one that makes you really kind of... It's not the best example of a Protectors story.
Right.
But I don't really know what...
Yeah,
what
maybe we get to see that.
Because it's all... or hear it. But yeah,
yes.
Chris mentioned it being a tough one to do on audio, but, you know, he does a remarkable job of taking all these visual stories and giving them a decent amount of narration so that you don't feel like you're missing out on the image. So I think...
absolutely.
A little small round of applause from us for Chris there. There you go. Well done, Chris. So it's very,
just a small one.
Impressive.
And that, of course, is why he's been given his own podcast.
That is true. If you would rather not listen to two idiots talking in the run-up to the Randomiser, then you can just go straight over to the Randomiser podcast. Search Gerry Anderson Randomiser. That's Randomiser with an S, not a Z, because we are very British, you know.
Yes, quite right.
And you'll be able to listen to them in isolation. They come out every Sunday, so perfect Sunday listening.
I mean, Two Idiots Talking is a great title for a podcast, though, isn't it?
Maybe we should rename this podcast to that.
It's a bit on the nose, isn't it? Anyway, just before we say our goodbyes, a couple of more emails have come in to podcast at gerryanderson.co.uk.
Just now?
Just this very minute, Emma Nichols has emailed to say, "Hi, Jamie and Richard, I do enjoy listening to the podcast, and it really helps me to get through this lockdown. Even my friends are listening to it too, and it's helped them as well. Stay safe," from Emma. Thank you. Chris Garrard. Anyway.
Yes, Chris Garrard.
Hi, Jamie and Richard. I have two Space 1999 related questions for you. Firstly, do you know when Space 1999, The Vault book by Marcus Hearn will be available?
No.
I remember that at the end of your interview with Marcus about Gerry, Marcus mentioned this new and exciting future publication, but I've not seen or heard anything more about it. Is there any news regarding the book?
No, the only news I can tell you is that due to circumstances beyond Marcus's control, the book has been delayed and they hope to get it out eventually, but that's all we can say, and as soon as there's any news, then we'll let you know.
Yeah. Secondly, says Chris, and you have more than likely been asked this by other Space 1999 fans, is there any chance of you interviewing any surviving actors from the show? Or how about a fascinating interview with FX legend Brian Johnson? I hope you both remaining safe and sane during the lockdown. Take care, gentlemen. Best wishes, Chris Garrard. Yeah.
So at some point, I hope to interview Nick Tate. But Nick is still a very busy actor. He does a lot of voiceover stuff, a lot of movie voiceover. He's a busy chap living between LA and Australia. I don't know where he is right now during all this stuff, but I certainly hope to chat to him at some point. Brian is a difficult one to pin down. We did try and have a Skype a while back, but had some technical issues, which suggests that remote recording is not possible, and therefore things are rather difficult at this point. So possibly. There's a couple of other ones on the horizon too. But Space 1999 is a difficult one to find surviving cast members for. It sounds terrible, isn't it? But it's true.
Also, it was quite an international production, really, wasn't it? So people are scattered all over the world, which isn't quite so much of a problem, I suppose, in these times of zooming and video calling and so on.
It just depends on technical setup, and quite often people don't. You can't expect people to have a really good recording setup. They often don't. But yes, we will try, and there's lots of interesting interviewees coming up, even though we've been going for 107 weeks.
I know, amazing.
A bit bonkers. Yes, so many more to come. Thank you for your email, Chris. And as with any of these things, we often get emails saying, is there any news on XYZ? And generally, if you go onto Google and search for the thing, and there is no news from the Gerry Anderson website, then that's because there's nothing that we can say publicly about it, or there is no news currently. The minute there is stuff, we always try and get it out on the website. So if you're looking for information on anything, do go to gerryanderson.co.uk and use the search feature, and you should be able to find all the answers to 92% of your questions.
Great. Yeah, and it is a trusted source, I suppose. I mean, you can go on Google and find all sorts of stuff about the remake of UFO and the reboot of Space 1999, but until you see it on the Gerry Anderson website, it ain't happening.
Exactly. And you can always look at the FAQ section if you have any queries about Space 1999 or UFO remakes. So there you go.
Exactly.
Right.
There we are.
Is that it? Are we done?
Done and dusted.
Very good.
Yep.
I know that you've got work to be doing, Richard. You've got writing to
Cool.
do, and you've got coffee to
Haven't I
drink, and
just?
you've got a river to sit by.
You're right there, yep.
So-
And sometimes I might even do all three at the same time.
Cool, you are a clown,
Yeah.
aren't you?
Imagine that.
Yeah, and that's why he's the one that adapts and reads Space Precinct Demeter City. Available now from the Gerry Anderson store and bigfinish.com.
Yeah, great.
Right,
Thanks.
let's go away, shall we? You've got things to do. The listeners have clearly got loads to do.
Of course they have.
Sorry for keeping you, everyone. We'll let you go now,
Yeah,
and we'll be
sorry
back for
about
Pod 108 next week.
See you then.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
How do you write, drink coffee, and sit by the river? Obviously, the sitting you do because you've got one bottom and you only need that to sit.
Yeah.
But so do you drink the coffee with your left hand, and do you write with a pen, or do you type with the right hand?
No. I see. So you want me to break it down? Well, I drink while I think.
Mm.
And then when I finish drinking, I write all night.
No. Including
You see?
poetry. You're so smart. And so then you just keep tapping the keys until you run out of ideas, and then you stop and drink more coffee. Is that the...
Well, you know I give myself a limit of 1,000 words a day, don't you, Jamie?
I think
once
it's
I hit
1,000 cups of
words, yeah, then I stop. Actually, for the other little thing that I'm doing for you at the moment, I've got myself, because that's a little bit shorter, each of the things.
Each thing we wink.
That's 500 words a day.
Really?
So I'm doing 1,000 words a day on my books that you know about, and 500 words a day on the other things that I'm doing for you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
You see?
Okay.
Isn't it? And cups of coffee in between.
The cups of coffee. I really thought you were going to say I limit myself to 1,000 cups of coffee a day.
I mean, I would if I could.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, same. Well, I'm about to make a third pot now, and it's not even 11 in the morning.
Great.
So, yes, okay, well, that's great. I'm really pleased to know about your process and that you're getting all of these things, and I look forward to the results very soon.
Exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, get on with your work. Go on.
All right. Well, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Gerry Anderson Podcast. Wasn't it fun?
You have been listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.